It has been a year since Donald Trump re emerged as president, and ever since he has been shocking the world with rugged unpredictability. Just as he looked set to assume office last year, countless analyses predicted that America under Trump 2.0 would turn inward looking, cocooned by its Make America Great Again, the MAGA rhetoric, and detached from forward posturing. At best, most analysts had argued Trump would focus solely on containing the rise of China at the expense of traditional allies in Europe. And yet, 1 year on, it is abundantly clear that those predictions were only half right. Trump's America is not inward looking, it is awkward looking. A paradoxical power simultaneously entrenching itself deeper into multiple theaters abroad, even as it claims to be retreating from the world for prioritizing America. But is that claim even true? Trump's America aids wars while declaring the end of endless wars, cuts alliances while multiplying engagements, unabashedly provoking both anxiety and dependence. In my column for ThePrint from November 2024, written just as Trump's victory seemed close, I had argued that the current global dynamics would prevent America from adopting an isolationist stance or focusing exclusively on the Indo-Pacific. And 1 year later, Trump has not turned America inward. He has made it transactional, unpredictable, and inconsistent, sometimes even at the cost of US interests. So let's decode Trump, the unapologist. If the Biden years were marked by cautious and often restrained diplomacy, Trump's second term has been unapologetic, transactional, inconsistent, and boldly unpredictable. Every partnership, from India to Japan to Europe, is now measured not in convergence of strategic visions or interest, but in the math of what each side can immediately deliver to the United States. For middle powers like India, this has been a jolt out of the comfort zone. Trump's pressures on trade and energy have exposed inconsistencies in New Delhi's multi aligned strategic imagination. India's balancing act, buying Russian oil while benefiting from Washington, has faced sharper scrutiny from Trump more than ever. But paradoxically, the silver lining is this has also forced India to strengthen economic and defense ties with more predictable partners such as France, Japan, and the UK, and to deepen engagement with Europe as a whole. So, Trump's unpredictability is not absence of strategy. It is strategy by other means, and it works only if the other side is not Beijing. And now let's take a look at just how many theaters Trump has gotten the US entrenched in. In today's video, I'll discuss at least four such theaters where US engagement has come at the expense of Indo-Pacific. First, the Middle East entrenchment. If one theater defines this awkward America, it is the Middle East. Conventional analysis suggested that Trump's MAGA instincts would push him away from the region's quagmires. Yet, reality has been quite the opposite. Trump has become further entrenched in the Middle East than any of his predecessors. The decisions taken in his two administrations have ranged from reviving the Abraham Accords to authorizing direct military deployments as new threats have engulfed the region. Now, I'm sure you all know that the October 7 Hamas attacks upended the fragile normalization that Trump 1.0 had so carefully brokered. Yet, instead of retreating, Trump doubled down. His decision to deploy the B 2 bombers alongside Israel against Iran was unprecedented for any US president, Republican or Democrat, as was his tacit nod for Israeli strikes that hit targets and Hamas targets they were inside Qatari territory, a long standing US defense partner. Now, this move had rocked the Gulf strategic architecture, pushing Saudi Arabia to sign an unusual security pact with Pakistan, invoking Islamabad's nuclear umbrella. That said, these crises have drawn in Washington deeper, not reduced its stakes. After his fancy for regaining Bagram in Afghanistan, Trump has recently pushed for a military base in Damascus in Syria to monitor the security situation in the fragmented country. His liking for al Shara, the new Syrian leader, has turned Syria into an unlikely hub for Trump's regional balancing act. A full fledged US base in Damascus would symbolize a fundamental realignment, positioning Washington as a broker between Israel and Syria on the one hand and Israel and Turkey on the other, while further isolating a weakened Iran and a declining Russia. So, this reiteration comes alongside hurried diplomatic improvisations. Let me tell you a few. A new Gaza peace plan that nobody fully understands, let alone trusts. A fresh security deal with Qatar and ongoing discussions with Saudi Arabia to expand defense and energy ties. In fact, Trump is willfully expanding the base of the Abraham Accords as well by including Kazakhstan, and he's been asking Saudi Arabia to join it too. And this move might win the Accords more nods than other Muslim nations. But you know what? That remains the surface because Trumpian inconsistency sits at the heart of this. For the conditions and the status quo that enabled the original Abraham Accords are no longer holding with Israel's unstoppable rampage and devaluation of US assurances by and large. So Trump's critics accuse him of fueling chaos. His supporters call it strategic boldness. And you know what? Both are right. He has made America less trusted, but still indispensable to the Middle East again, although his method is constant improvisation rather than coherent strategy. Now, second, the Latin American conundrum. If Trump's engagement in the Middle East surprises, his renewed focus on Latin America compounds. After all, this was the region that interested him primarily for demanding tighter borders, core to his anti immigration populism. And yet, over the past 2 months, DC has flooded the Caribbean and South American waters with warships, fighter jets, marines, and with strikes that have already killed about 65 people, all under the banner of an anti narcotics campaign that now looks openly like a prelude to regime change. The Trump administration's escalating rhetoric against Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, including a latest Senate vote rejecting any limits on Trump's ability to strike Venezuelan targets, marks the most direct US threat to Latin American government in decades. A bounty on Maduro and targeting Colombia's left wing president Gustavo Petro perhaps carries a wider message. Trump is not content with building walls. He wants to reiterate dominance in what he sees as America's hemisphere, regardless of the costs. Even where he withdraws aid, it is not a vacuum per se. He replaces diplomacy with deterrence. In this sense, what Trump has done is that he has militarized engagement with Latin America. And this is not retreat or isolationism. Now let's look at the third theater, Europe's awakening, where burden sharing and buying more American weapons is now become the strategy. Across the Atlantic, Trump's unpredictability has become Europe's undoing, and paradoxically, it's a wake up call too. While pundits had warned of NATO's decapacitation, Trump's relentless pressure on European allies to pay more for their security has in fact forced them to act. Europe is now spending more on defense than at any other time since the Cold War, even as it continues to depend on American technology, especially intelligence and arms. So Trump has successfully monetized transatlantic anxiety, turning burden sharing into a pragmatic business model. And this is not equal to retreat of America. Now, the outcome is a militarizing Europe, one that is paying more and yet feeling less secure. I have written a great deal on this earlier and will keep tracking developments there. But now let's come to the fourth theater, and these are the forgotten theaters of Africa. Even Africa, long underengaged by Washington's strategic gaze, has not escaped Trump's erratic activism. His recent threat of military action in Nigeria, responding to what he called mass violence against Christians, is the first time since the early 90s that a US president has publicly expressed intervention in sub Saharan Africa outside a United Nations framework. Now, for the US Africa Command, which has avoided direct combat missions since its creation in 2007, this could be a profound shift. Trump's rhetoric, shrouded in moral outrage, is in fact a continuation of his core principles, transactionalism and unpredictability. And now let's come to the Indo Pacific paradox. Ironically, the one region most analysts expected Trump to prioritize, the Indo Pacific, has been conspicuously underattended and underdiscussed until now. Despite his hawkish advisors and the rhetoric around China's rise, Trump has displayed remarkable nonchalance toward the court and the future of Taiwan security. Elbridge Colby and other Indo Pacific hawks are hardly noticeable lately. Trump's philandering with Pakistan's unending flattery, post Operation Sindoor, and pointed indifference to India's sensitivities have further complicated the balance in the Indian subcontinent. The once promising renewal of the US India defense framework this month felt perfunctory, not substantive in the least. Now, this neglect means more than merely disengagement or apathy. It shows a certain nonchalance in Trump's approach that I will now turn to. The Italian term sprezzatura, which means a studied nonchalance that conceals intention, best captures the spirit of Trump's foreign policy so far. He interrupts other statesmen, often gets the countries' names wrong, confuses between Albania and Armenia, posts his foreign policy on Truth Social, basks in flattery, acts when others hesitate, and yet backs down equally nonchalantly when the adversary is China. The pattern I see is unpredictability as method, transactionalism as ideology, and disruption as diplomacy. This performance keeps allies guessing and adversaries off balance. Their reactions, regardless, all remain caught in the pull of Trump's America, still the world's strongest power, now challenged by Beijing's rise and responding to it as unevenly as imaginable. In my opinion, America under Trump seems unsettled with its own might, expanding its reach abroad while fueling its anxieties inward, often targeting the very immigrants who built its nation. A paradox foregrounded by Zohran Mamdani's powerful speech as New York's latest mayor. I'm sure you've noticed the latest frenzy around Mamdani. But coming back to Mr. President, while Trump seems overconfident and defiant, Trump's America is neither fully inward nor fully outward. It continues to remain asymmetrically powerful and awkward. I'll be back to discuss the many more paradoxes we will witness in the Trumpian times. Stay tuned.